Ndewonu. Abụkwa m onye Igbo. I'm pleased to be back in Enugu. I was actually born here in Enugu, but I'm from Ebonyi. And almost all through my life, I've often had to convince people that I'm actually Igbo. My name doesn't sound Igbo. Indeed, when I was writing JAMB, of course, like every Igbo boy, I wanted to go to the University of Nigeria. And my dad said, if anybody in the University of Nigeria looks at your name, Joe Abba, they will never admit you. You don't have an Igbo name. So you have two choices. You can either choose Chukwuemeka or Chukwudi. The only Chukwuemeka I knew was a bad boy. So I chose Chukwudi. And that's my middle name, although I wasn't given it from birth. But it's the name I then adopted. When I was about to get married, my wife is from Ogun State. My mother-in-law asked her, this man that wants to marry you, what's his name? He said his name is Joe Abba. She said, they've played my daughter 419. Which Igbo man do you know that is not Okeke or Okonkwa or Nweke? He told you he's a lawyer. Have you seen his certificates? My wife came very humbly. Joe, you know that your certificate, where did you keep it? Because she needed to convince the mother that I'm actually real. It's a great privilege to be invited to address such an august audience this evening. And Patrick and Nana have asked me to compress into 15 minutes something I've spent 33 years of my life working on all over the world. But I'm grateful that there's an opportunity to interact afterwards. So what I'll use my 15 minutes to do would essentially be to point the conversation that will follow in certain directions so that we can engage further on some of them. I came here from Owerri this afternoon because I had the privilege of having been appointed into Governor-elect Emeka Ihedioha's transition committee. And I'm in the committee on good governance. But as I was picked up from Owerri Airport heading to the hotel, a vehicle blocked our car. And it wasn't clear in which direction he wanted to go. And so the driver that picked me up sort of shouted at him, "Puonozo, Iburochas." For people who may watch the video of this event later, who are not Igbo speakers, I'll just interpret. It just meant, get out of the way. Are you Rochas? And so, all the way from where that event took place to my hotel, I kept reflecting on what exactly did he mean by saying Puonozo Iburochas. Did he mean, why are you blocking the road? Are you Rochas that has the power to block the road? Is that what he meant? Or did he mean, you don't know where you're going? Are you Rochas? And I kept thinking about this until we got to the hotel. And unfortunately, I was so deep in thought that I actually forgot to ask him, which exactly did you mean? But it was pertinent for the topic I've been asked to speak on. OHA NWE EZE. If the earlier meaning of Puonos or Ibu meant, do you think your roachers who can block the road? Then, OHA NWE EZE, OHA EZE NWE. I started to reflect on this as I considered the topic. And then my thoughts moved on to the next usual saying, OHA NWE EZE. So, is it that OHA NWE EZE or OHA NWE EZE? And when I was asked to speak on OHA NWE EZE, did it mean the community has a king? Or did it mean the king belongs to the community and the community owns the king? Which exactly did it mean? And so if you reflect on this concept of OHA NWE EZE and OHA NWE EZE, then you start to wonder, is the governor actually the king or not? Don't forget that there is no Igwe or traditional ruler that does not get his staff of office from the governor. There is none that is not on the payroll of the state. There is none that a governor cannot depose if he really wants to. Don't also forget that perhaps the most important economic value in any society, apart from its people, which is land, is in the complete control of the governor. The governor can take over your land, demolish your property, and there's nothing you can do about it. He has immunity. If you take him to court, in 10 years' time, the court might hear your case and determine that he had injured you. His tenure is only for 8 years maximum. He would have left government by then. Let's even assume that by some miracle, you were able to get judgment against that action of the governor during the time he is there. And the court orders him to pay compensation. Do you think it's his own money he will use? He will use the money of all of us to pay that compensation. The governor influences who becomes a lawmaker. In fact, your governor will call you and say, hey, go and buy a form. If you go and buy a form without the governor, you're on your own. The governor gets recommendations about who to appoint as chief judge. And so when people call governors executive governor, it actually diminishes their power. Because it's not just the governor of the executive. He's actually the emperor. And so the governor is more powerful than any Eze. Doesn't matter which one you call. The governor is more powerful. But how do we react to this situation? Is it not us Igbos that say that when a god becomes too powerful, we will remind it of the wood it was carved from? Have we been doing that? Have we been doing that? If at a point in the past, the Igbo had no king, I'm sorry to tell you, you do now. And that's why we must pay attention to issues of governance. And that's why I'm here to tell you that governance matters. But what is this governance that we talk about? I think it's important that we separate that from politics. They are related, but different. You see, politics is the activities through which one group gains power and control over the rest of us. It's a simple case of inclusion and exclusion. We want our people to be in power. We don't want their people. A bit like football. We support Arsenal. We don't support Tottenham. We support Manchester United. We don't want Man City to win the league. Except that football is entertainment. This is real life. However, too often, it is that contestation for power that we tend to focus on the most. Which group will have power over us? Every 4 years, every 8 years, we will change the players, but the game never actually changes. We will change the personnel, but not much actually changes on the ground. And so when some of us refuse to align with any particular political group, it is because we see the problem as the system rather than the personnel. And so when you have a system through which the president must, whether he likes it or not, have 36 ministers. Whether he needs it or not, he must have 36 ministers. When the system says that as a governor you have complete immunity, civil and criminal, when the constitution is not clear who exactly owns the budget, who is responsible for what, when the system is based on sharing rather than production, then it really doesn't matter who comes. You have a National Assembly that can choose how much to vote to itself because he has the power to do so. I worked as DG for 4 years. At the time I left, I was owing school fees. Everybody who stops being a legislator will get a severance allowance of millions because they can do it. We've had a national conference that cost us a lot of money, had a lot of very, very good recommendations come out of it. The people who can implement it are the National Assembly. All the amendments they've made, most of the amendments to the constitutions they've made have been those that affect them, not us. And so, the focus needs to start to shift a little bit from who gets power and who doesn't get power to what do people do with the power when they get it. And that is the difference between politics and governance. Governance is how that power and control is exercised for the benefit of the rest of us. It is my view that that is one area that we don't focus sufficiently on. And when we focus on this area at all, our focus is almost exclusively on the federal government. Jonathan did this. Buhari did that. Atiku will do the other. At the odd time, when we focus on state-level governance, we only ask 2 questions. Is he paying salaries? Is he building roads? Once you're paying salaries and you're building roads, you win every election in the Southeast. Everyone. Forget about everything else. Pay salaries and build roads. Local government doesn't even feature. Nobody even talks about local government at all. And the discussions among us Igbos is, look, we don't need government. We just need to get government out of the way. Do our business and make money. We don't want government. Let them keep their government in Abuja. Let anybody who likes go and contest. We just want to make money and do our business. And this idea is not unique to Igbos. In fact, many of the classical economists say the same things. You just need to get government out of the way and allow the private sector to work, allow the markets to work. That's all you need to do. Shrink government, make it as little as possible, get them out of the way. Perhaps the foremost proponent of this idea is an economist called Milton Friedman. And Milton Friedman once said, if you put the federal government in charge of the Sahara Desert, in 5 years' time, there will be a shortage of sand. But here is the problem. Without government action, the Sahara Desert is advancing southwards at the rate of 6 kilometers every 10 years. So every 10 years, 6 kilometers of arable land is wiped away. 350,000 hectares in Nigeria alone, every year, being lost to the Sahara Desert. Is it then any surprise that we have a farmer-herdsman crisis? Because apart from any of the politics around it, there is simply an issue of survival. There's an issue of just having sufficient land, both to farm on and to graze animals on. And that tension is almost automatic. That is why perhaps you should have the government in charge of the Sahara Desert. But what is this governance that I keep talking about? It's basically the way that power is exercised in a society. And it includes the capacity of the government to formulate and implement sound policies and to deliver and ensure the delivery of services to its citizens. Now, I said one of its roles is to deliver or ensure the delivery of services to its citizens. It doesn't mean government must do everything itself, but it is government's responsibility to ensure that proper services are delivered to its citizens. And that's why I was quite disappointed, I think it was last week or the week before last, when the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission said, it is not our responsibility to provide meters to people. It's the responsibility of discos. And I say to them, if the discos are not doing it, it is your responsibility to make them do it. Because that is the proper role of government. But people look at the capacity of government along about six main measures. So they look at, if government is said to be doing well, you look at how much voice do people have and how accountable is government. So how much voice do people have to question government and how accountable is government to respond to that questioning? Is there political stability? So can you choose your leaders in a stable way, devoid of violence? And I have to say that Nigeria had been making steady progression in its elections since, I think, 2011. Almost every election has been better than the last one, with the worst one perhaps being the 2003 elections. It's unfortunate that we have regressed in terms of political violence in the 2019 elections. But your ability to conduct free and fair elections devoid of violence is one of the measures of governance. Then you also look at government effectiveness. How effective is government at delivering what it does? You look at regulatory quality. How well does it regulate? So again, we seem to have regressed from when, at a point, during the tenure of Professor Dora Akunyili of blessed memory, the threat used to be, I will report you to NAFDAC. Now, our young men are drinking alcoholic concoctions at 9 a.m. in the morning, and there's no regulation. The chemists are again selling fake drugs with no regulation. Again, we've regressed in that regard. So the quality of regulation is also key, as is the rule of law and the control of corruption. So how effectively government controls corruption, how effectively the rule of law is enthroned are key measures of governance success. Why does it matter? Why do all these things I'm saying matter? Let me give you some quotes. The World Bank said, underlying the litany of Africa's development problems is a crisis of governance. Weak governance cannot readily support a dynamic economy. Weak governance cannot readily support a dynamic economy. Tony Blair said, the issue of good governance and capacity building is what we believe lies at the core of all Africa's problems. The late Kofi Annan said, good governance is perhaps the single most important factor in eradicating poverty and promoting development. Barack Obama said, development depends upon good governance. That is the ingredient which has been missing in far too many places for far too long. Finally, The Economist magazine said, of all the ills that kill the poor, none is as lethal as bad government. I want us to reflect on that last one. Of all the ills that kill the poor, none is as lethal as bad government. Not malaria, not HIV/AIDS, not road accidents, not even juju from village people. Bad government is what kills the poor the most. But what is the other side? What is good governance? You can define it as the representation of an unbiased state that puts the needs of the population as a whole first. The needs of the population as a whole first. And that does not serve any agenda except the good of the people. Needs to put the needs of the population as a whole first, and does not serve any agenda except the good of the people. Why is this important? It's important because the government and the economy are inseparable. If any government wants to take down Dangote today, it will only take 24 hours. Just 24 hours. If any government wants to take him down. And when You hear a lot of our people talk about the Asian miracle because, of course, we've looked to the West and we're still not developing. So we've now started to look to the East. And you hear a lot of our people who tell you about China, and Malaysia, and Singapore, and Japan, and many of these other Asian countries that were in a similar situation to us a few decades ago, but have now been able to transcend that position. What people don't tell you when they talk about the Asian tigers is actually how those countries use their government to educate their people. How those countries use their government to subsidize their industries. How they delay the full adoption of free, unregulated markets until they had a wealthy enough economy and mature enough industries. The United States started subsidizing technical research in universities in the 1800s. And it was the support of government that gave rise to schools like the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, and the University of California at Berkeley. You probably are not aware that it was army chemists that discovered the best way to purify water. You probably don't know that it was government scientists that developed the computer chip, the internet, your smartphone that you carry. How many people in the audience were old enough to own a Nokia 3310? Okay. So the difference between your Nokia 3310 and your iPhone or your Samsung, the smart in your smartphone was invented by government scientists. The GPS was invented by government, not Google. So when I was coming here, I was saying, no, I'm going to Enugu Sports Club. Let me check it on Google. The GPS was invented by government scientists. The airbag in your car was invented by government scientists. I can go on and on and on. Apple, which is seen as one of the most innovative private sector organizations in the world, relies very heavily on government research. The iPod came out of the research done by two government scientists for which they won a Nobel Prize. You probably don't know that. The display screen on your phone, on your iPhone, is from government research. Touch screens is from government research. Smaller chips, making the phones smaller and smaller and lighter, is from government research. Have I made the case for the importance of government in our lives? The question then is, what do we do about it? What do we do? There are things I think we need to pay more attention to. We need to be concerned about how government delivers public goods to citizens. That is health, education, infrastructure, security, how it gives us licenses, how it manages land. All of these things are of vital importance. We should not just stop at, does he pay salaries, does he build roads? And I'm not saying this only as individuals. I'm also talking about our NGOs. Our foremost NGOs focusing on governance these days are hardly present in the Southeast. Those focusing on budget transparency, those focusing on procurement transparency, they're hardly in the Southeast. And we need to start to ask questions. If indeed, OHA NWE EZE, we need to start to ask the questions of those people that superintend over our affairs. We need to pay attention to the checks and balances through which we hold government to account for its actions. And that includes how they spend our money, the capacity of our legislature. So let's not only focus on who becomes governor or who becomes president. Actually, the people that can do you the most damage is your legislature. They are the ones that can do you the most damage. And so if we don't start to pay attention on the quality of people that gets into our legislature, we are actually doing ourselves a lot of harm. Thirdly, we need to focus on the ability of our citizens to participate in the program, in the process of governance. And by this, I don't only mean elections. As many of us as possible should put ourselves forward to run for elective positions. I say that being someone who has vowed not to run for elective position. I say that because I'm a Christian. The Bible talks about the 5 gifts of the Holy Spirit. Contesting election is not my gift. My gift is advising and guiding those in power. That's what I do well, and that's what I'm able to offer. But we need to participate in the way that we are governed, all of us. And a very good example of that was 2 years ago when all the women groups in Kano State got together and itemized what they wanted to see in the Kano State budget. All the women, the various women groups came together and said to the governor, this is what we want to see in the budget. Now, you will be interested to know what happened. Did the governor eventually include those things? How many did he include? Did he actually implement them? And those will be important questions. The important issue for me is that it happened. Is that the women realized that this person, or anywhere, we should tell him what we want for him to put in the budget. I submit that we need to start to think in that way. You don't need to be in government to focus on governance. Lagos is seen as one of the better managed states in the country. For quite a while, Lagos has kept faith with the process of development planning. Even when the federal government stopped doing development plans, Lagos carried on doing development plans. Every year, Lagos has a summit, an economic summit, called the Nkata Summit. And my brother, the former DG of NESG, former Minister Frank Weke, knows what I'm talking about. But here is what happened. All of that planning is done collectively by the key stakeholders. So, what was the outcome? What was the outcome of this? The outcome is that there's a plan for how Lagos will develop going forward. The key stakeholders felt that a particular governor was beginning to deviate from that plan. And they went to their leader and said, this man is deviating from this plan. We don't want him anymore. We don't want him to come back for a second term. Many people thought, oh, it was this leader that said, I don't want you again. But the leader is a politician, he's smart. He knows that if the key stakeholders come and say, we don't want this man, and he doesn't listen, he risks his own leadership position. This is what has happened in Lagos. We Igbos don't have such a leader that I'm aware of. And when Asiwaju Bola Tinubu was asked Who made you the leader of the Yorubas? You know, I told you I'm a Christian. Okay. He said, I'm a Muslim. And when we Muslims gather to pray, Prof. Samuel Halu walks in and okay, what he actually said when they asked him, who made you the leader of the Yorubas? How did you become the leader of the Yorubas? What he said is that I'm a Muslim, and when Muslims gather to pray, it is the first person that steps forward that leads the prayers. There is no election. There is no nomination. It is whoever steps forward first. That's the person that leads the prayer. And as I was just about to say that, Prof. Samuel walked in. There's a need for us to think beyond one state. There's a need for us to think as a region, as a people. There's a need for us to think about our economy as a regional economy. There's a need for our governors and our leaders to invest in technology. There's a need to invest in research in our universities. There's a need to bring back technical education, vocational education into Igbo land. There's a need for us to go into the public service. We cannot be only in the private sector. As at the time that the Civil War broke out, virtually every major government position of an intellectual nature was held by an Igbo man. At the breakout of the Biafran War, virtually every innovation in terms of technology was coming out of the Southeast. We need to go back to that. We need to encourage our people. We need to invest in technical education. We need to invest in research. Building roads is important. Paying salaries is important. But applying your brain as to how you can energize an entire regional economy is perhaps even more important. We need to unleash the potential that has been latent in us for the last 50 years. We need to get over the Civil War. It is done. We need to take charge again. We need to lead again. And we need to do that by deed and not just by word. We need to do that collectively with a united vision for what we want from our people, rather than mundane political differences. Many of you would have come across a book called Why Nations Fail by Asimoglu and Robinson. And it talked about the importance of institutions. Suffice it to say that, and when it talks about the importance of institutions, it talks about the need not to focus too much on the personality, but to focus on how things are done. We grow wiser every day. Their forthcoming book is called The Leviathan. The Leviathan is the state. Let me end with a quote from the World Bank World Development Report, 1997. It says, and I quote, "State-dominated development has failed, but so will stateless development. Development without an effective state is impossible." Thank you for your time.